Let's go, girls.
From New York City to Los Angeles, Powered Up with Beck and Franklin is giving women of all ages permission to live the life they've always dreamed of. Why live in black and white when you can choose the brilliance of 3D and Technicolor? Each week, Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin and their high-powered guests will be here to cheer you on, to share their challenges, their successes, and what they've learned along the way. It's all about women supporting women. The stories and practical tips on sex, beauty, money, and so much more are designed to help you reconnect to the powerful woman you are. Fabulous knows no limits. Now it's time for you to expand your boundaries. Here are Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Linda Franklin, and we've got a neat show today. We are going to be visiting with Lance Secretan, and he's got so many different, he's got his finger in so many different pies. It's a lot of fun to have somebody on the show like this. Linda, one of the things that is so exciting about having a guest like this is that we can talk about anything under the sun, I feel.
Yeah, he's certainly done everything. I'm looking at all his accomplishments, and he's quite a guy. And I see that he splits his time between Colorado and Ontario, and I want to ask him where in Ontario, because that's my home ground.
That is. Well, without further ado, let's bring Lance Secretan on the show today. Lance, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, you got two girls from your old stomping grounds. Linda, go ahead.
No, I see that you split your time between Colorado and Ontario, and I'm just wondering in Ontario where, because I'm a Toronto girl.
Well, I'm from Caledon. I don't know where that is, but it's northwest of Toronto in the country.
Yes, and it's beautiful country.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. God's country.
Yeah, well, I'm in New York now, and have been here for I guess most of my life now, but I still go back to Toronto all the time, and it's a beautiful city, and Canada's wonderful.
Yes, and then the other half of my time I'm in Colorado up in the mountains, so I'm a passionate skier, so
wow.
That's God's country too. So God actually has two parts of two places.
Well, you're a lucky man.
So I want to jump right in, because I have so many questions for Lance, and I've got in my hand here two of your books, The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch, and then I also have The Love Story, an intensely personal memoir. And I wanted to ask you, when you wrote the memoir, your wife Tricia and you have been, together before you were married, and you guys have been together a long time. And to write your love story in a book means that your marriage is hopefully pretty solid. What do you think the key was to keeping you guys together for so long?
Well, I think it's all the obvious things. It's compassion and caring, integrity, trust, loyalty, love, passion, pretty well all those things that anybody would recognize as the gifts of a great romance, but then you have to add hard work, don't you, to it? And it often amazes me when people have relationships. They have this extraordinary first experience together where they're falling over themselves to inspire and uplift each other, and then it sort of goes downhill. 5 years later, 55% of those people are in divorce courts. And don't you think it's just because they stopped trying?
Oh, I do. I mean, I'm one of the 50% that went through the divorce court. And, I wasn't willing to leave any stone unturned, to save my marriage. And I had two small children. But it takes two people to want to work at it. One person can work and work and work, but if the other doesn't want to stay, or, that was the thing that I had. I'm a never say die, dog with a bone girl. Linda, you'll back me up on that.
No, absolutely. And I guess I am too, because I've known my husband, for since I was 19 years old, and we're still together. Many, many decades later. We lived together for a very long time before we got married, but I think that was the escape route. If we needed it, it was there. And then we decided to get married and didn't get married till 1988. But so now it's 27 years that we've been married. So, yeah. But people change so much, through the decades. It's really, really hard to keep that all together because you certainly aren't the same people that you were when you met. That's for sure.
No, but I think you may have identified a secret, which of course will shock a lot of people. But the idea of living together for a number of years before you get married is, I think, a really good idea. We did that too, 9 years. And if you don't know someone after 9 years of living together, you're probably never going to.
You would think so, right? No, well, I'm more than 9 years and over 20 before we actually tied the knot. And it's the funniest thing because when we went to actually get married, we had to sign in the Jewish faith a ketubah, and my husband could not get his hand down to the paper. He was shaking like a leaf to actually, sign the certificate. So, no, I think even after 20 some odd years, he was still pretty nervous.
Still nervous, yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So my wife and I noticed that people we knew who lived together and then got married, many of them, their new relationship, their marriage, fell apart. They'd been just fine when they were living together, but as soon as they got married, everything went off the rails. So we said, let's never do that. And then I knew that her mother would love for us to be married, so I planned a secret wedding in Bermuda. And a few weeks before we went, I broke my leg in 9 places in a skiing accident. So I told my wife, Trish, that she should come with me and that she needed to carry my bags because I couldn't do it. I was in crutches. And so I sprung this whole thing on her when we arrived and proposed to her. We were in a taxi actually going somewhere, and I gave some music to the driver and said, please play these songs. And while they were playing, I proposed to her in the back seat of this taxi. And I said, would you marry me? And she said, no. No, we've already agreed this. It's no problem. No, we're not going to do that. No, I said, really, would you marry me? And she said, oh, okay. And she said, when? And I said, well, day after tomorrow. I almost fell out of the taxi. So, yeah, it was a fun experience.
Yes. Well, what did you think the difference was, while you're living together and then the marriage? Because people ask me all the time, so you were living together for so many years and you had, a good relationship. Why did you decide to get married? And you know what? I don't have a good answer.
No. And my answer was because I think my wife's mom would really old-fashioned, and just wanted that, and it was no big deal for me to do that. I wanted to do it for her, too. We had a great relationship with her mom. But I think that what happens sometimes is that people think that piece of paper lets them off the hook. They don't have to try anymore because it's a contract. And, when you're living together, of course, the laws have all changed now, so this is sort of irrelevant, but it depends state by state because there are different rules for what cohabitation means and what the legal results of that are and so on. But technically, you're just people living together under the same roof, and then when you get married, you're not so much.
Well, Sandra, you don't have that experience, but maybe you will. Maybe your answer is living together with somebody before you decide to get married.
Well, that's it's funny you say that because I was married, Lance, for 10 years and I had a little baby and a toddler when my ex-husband left me for somebody else. And so it took me a good probably 5 years to kind of recover from that. And then I'm busy building my business and raising my children. And the question I have now, though, and I'll pose it to each of you, is why get married at all? Like, why would I ever marry someone? You guys lived together for 20 and 9 years, respectively. I was married. I had my children. I don't intend to have more children. Why would I even get married? Linda, I'll go to you, or Lance.
Why would you have a new romantic relationship, do you mean?
No, I could see having a romantic relationship or a boyfriend or, things like that. Because, and I'll be honest, Lance, when I read your book, there were parts of it that really made me cry because I thought, I will never have this. I don't even know if I could let myself have these things. When I read your wedding vows, that was the thing that unglued me. And maybe I have all these repressed things that, are in there, but there's part of me that just looks at this and go, well, I'll never have this, or why would I even get married again?
One of the reasons I wrote the book is because I believe everyone can have this. And more than that, I think everybody deserves this.
Linda, we have about 2 minutes to break. What do you say?
I don't know if I'm a big fan of marriage, but I am a big fan of having somebody in your life that you love and you can share your lifetime together. And I don't think it's a big deal. But, I really believe that, and you have to watch your words because you say, I don't think I can, and, it'll never happen. And, that you don't want to say words like that because it interferes with your psyche in there. So, yes, everybody, when you're ready, someone will come that you'll adore, and you'll know when it's time. You don't force it. You just feel it.
But I find it interesting that both you and Lance, you took the 20-year marriage route. Lance took the 9-year marriage route. I'm not 20 years old anymore, so not that I'm old or anything, but, I think it's interesting when, you've got two long-term happily married people here and then, kind of one divorced single mom. I think there's a lot of people who fall into my boat, whether you're second career, second family, second marriage, second whatever. Where does that line draw? Now, I need to take us to commercial break, but I loved Lance's book, and so I want to talk more about it. If you guys would like to get copies of this book, his name is Lance Secretan. That's spelled Secretan. The books are The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch. That's the Inspire Self, Inspire Others, and Inspire the Words, and the world. And then there's the love story, that intensely personal memoir. You want to get a copy of it because it really does tug at your heartstrings. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about inspiration. We're going to talk a little bit more about inspiration in the second half of our lives. This is Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin for Powered Up Talk Radio with Lance Secretan. We'll be back after the break.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin after these messages.
Time and change are accelerating, making it increasingly difficult to gracefully go with the flow. Women Change the World presents conversations with featured guests about changes in their lives and how that change has created new and positive opportunities. Women Change the World with your host, Dr. Beth Golden, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central here on TogiNet.com. We all know that change can knock you off course, and Dr. Beth's show and practices focus on revealing everything that's right with you. This information will help you make choices that align your true nature and set you along your path of least resistance. As Dr. Beth says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. For more on Dr. Beth and her show, go to drbethgolden.com. That's drbethgolden.com. Women Change the World with your host, Dr. Beth Golden, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central, here on TogiNet.com.
When airplanes first began carrying passengers, everyone was treated to first-class accommodations. Caviar and sandwiches were presented on porcelain plates, with beverages served in crystal. Flying was truly a special event, as passengers wore suits and evening dresses. What do you call a person who is afraid to fly? An aeroacrophobic. The airlines required stewardesses to be unmarried, and many were nurses as well. To be a pilot was respected and revered. What do you call a person who chooses a career based on the glamorous image it conveys? A MODOK. A typical flight in those days from London to Singapore would cost over $17,000 today and take 8 days. What's another word for jet lag? Dysrhythmia.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with Sandra, Beck, and Linda Franklin. Here's more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Linda Franklin and this is Powered Up Talk Radio and this is our guest Lance Secretan and he's written a couple books, The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch. He's also written the Love Story book, which is his intensely personal memoir that made me cry. Now, when we went to break, we talked a little bit about, kind of marriages that last the test of time and some of the secrets for that. What I find interesting, Lance, because I'm like a little conservative country girl at heart, and I always believe that the man leads the family. Well, I'm finding that not to be true as a single parent. And I look at you as a leadership expert, and you write this book on leadership to inspire yourself and inspire others and inspire the world. How have you translated that to the success in your marriage?
Well, I think that the search that I've been on, actually, The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch was my 15th book. And so I've written a lot about leadership, and I've come to the realization that leadership is never going to be found. We will not be able to teach it or discover it. You will realize that leadership is broken everywhere, whether it's Wall Street or Washington or healthcare or education or the Roman Catholic Church or the police or wherever you look. Leadership is broken, and yet we spend $170 billion a year on leadership development, and there are 244,000 books on Amazon.com about leadership. So when I wrote A Love Story, well, let me back up. When I wrote The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch, that book is about inspiration, because that's what we need to replace leadership. We're not looking for more leadership. We're looking to be inspired. What we're looking for from our political leaders, from our CEOs, from each other, from every part of life, we're looking to be inspired. A Love Story is, of course, not a business book, and it was never intended to be, and that wasn't my plan. But what I learned after I wrote it, really, was that the reason why leadership doesn't work is because we teach it like engineering. And if you were to ask people, what are the characteristics of leadership, you would get an answer like, well, good decision-making, motivating the team, building the team, having a good strategy, having vision, all those good things. Well, if you were to take those into a romantic relationship, none of those would really be the things you'd be looking for. If you ask what is it that's special about a romantic relationship, it would be compassion, integrity, trust, love, engagement, romance, and, in other words, the ingredients of a love story. Why do we have two different systems, one at home and one at work, for how we inspire people? Because actually, in a romantic relationship, the rule for both parties is how can we inspire each other more? Every day. And that's the same rule we use in the business world. So what I've learned along the way is actually it's really about building inspiring relationships. What is a marriage? It's an inspiring relationship. When it's no longer inspiring, we leave them. And that's true of everything else. If we like a movie and we're inspired by it, we'll stay to the end. If we're not inspired by it, we'll leave. If we have a restaurant that's our favorite because it inspires us, we'll keep going there. As soon as it doesn't inspire us, we'll leave. If we see a rose we find fascinating and beautiful and inspiring, we'll smell it. If it doesn't do that for us anymore, we don't do it anymore. So inspiring relationships is the answer to just about everything that goes on in our lives, including at home and at work.
Boy, you're so right, and we've lost leadership. That's for sure. I mean, if you caught the debates last night, I mean, we're in a very sad state of affairs, and if this is what our country's come to, we really have to do a 360 and start rethinking everything.
Yeah.
It's
not inspiring to yell at people.
No, it's not inspiring to yell at people. It's not inspiring to lie to people. It's not, inspiring to tear people down. And and that's where we are. I mean, if we, it's just. I think that there's so many changes coming, and they're coming so fast. I don't think people can actually, grasp them, because what was is not there anymore. And if you're trying to hold on to what was, I think you're going to be very sorely disappointed, and because it's gone.
And I think the hardest thing for me, and, I know I'm a little different than you guys, because I am a single mom with 2 kids. The hardest thing I've found with this is, and Lance, I really try to lead my family with integrity and authority and honesty. And, Linda's a great friend to me, supporting me in trying to raise 2 little boys on my own. The hardest thing that I found when sitting and talking to my kids was that they're yelling at each other, they're insulting each other, at times they're calling each other names, they're espousing, like our leadership so far in these arenas are espousing everything as a parent I stand against. And so how can you take that dynamic and change it? Or is this just something that's the way of the world and we're going to have to live with? Like, you are, like, according to your website, the 26th most influential executive coach in the world. So how do you turn something like that around?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, get rid of the television. I haven't had a television for 25 years, and I think it was Thoreau who said, if you show me a train wreck, I get the concept. I don't actually need to get into a train wreck and watch it. And I think that's part of there are toxins in our lives, and we need to get rid of them, whether it's in our food or in our air, or whether it's the media that comes at us. And I think that's one thing. We can get our information in lots of different ways, and they don't have to be toxic. The other thing, though, is this. I think with your boys, we all have the right to have a belief or to have an opinion, but we need to have that opinion in a way that inspires the other person. So if I disagree with you, the message I would give to the boys is say what you want, but make sure the other boy feels bigger, not smaller, as a result of what you just said. You're entitled to your view, but don't make it personal. Make it so that both of you feel better as a result of that exchange.
I was just writing this down because I'm going to do this at dinner tonight.
No, you're a great mom. So I think you do a lot of those things just innately. It just comes to you. So, Lance, when you've interviewed so many CEOs, and I mean, I saw that your interview with former President Clinton. When you're sitting down with somebody and you're asking them all these questions, can you tell if they're really if do they inspire you, or do some of them not, but you have to go on and pretend that they did?
Well, yes, there's some of those, aren't there? But I think also the question is whether they're authentic. And I think that's what I'm looking for. If someone is authentically inspiring you, then, what I try and do, and I know I don't do it every day all the time, but I try and do it as much as I can, which is I want to know, how do I inspire? I can tell you I was working with a group of CEOs a while back, and one of the CEOs stood up. There's about 30 of them. One of them stood up in this workshop we were doing and just railed into me. He said, you're just so full of it. This is never going to work in our company. You must be from California. There's all this woo-woo, fluffy stuff, and so on. He just went on and on and on. And then he sat down. And you could just cut the air with a knife. And this was a new client, so I thought, this is a moment of truth. I'm either going to lose a client here or we're going to make a breakthrough. So I paused and I thought, my head was racing. And eventually I said to him, his name was Tom Anderson, I said, Tom, I think I get what you just said, but could you say it again in a way that inspires me?
Ooh.
He got up on his feet and he said, yeah, I can do that. And he did.
Wow.
We became great pals. We've been skiing together ever since, and and everybody, of course, in the room let a big breath out.
Yeah.
As we crossed a bridge. But it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Why did you just say something to me that is personal, crushing, wounding, and hurtful? Do you expect to gain something from doing that?
Well, I think some of them do. Yeah, I absolutely do. I worked in, Disney and CBS and IBM and the military. And yeah, I think sometimes people absolutely do intend to crush the people around them in order for them to feel successful and powerful and in control.
Well, how foolish they are, because it doesn't work, as you can see. And, I tell people the story about when I was at an airport in Pittsburgh, and there was a ground stop, and the place is a zoo. And I'm up at the counter, and there's hundreds of other people, all our flights canceled, and we're standing there, and this man is yelling at the staff behind the counter, and finally he's exasperated. He puts his hands on his hips, and he says, "Do you know who I am?" And the calm employee comes out from behind the counter and says, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, this man doesn't know who he is." And then I tell you a second story. I was in Boston, and same thing, because I travel a lot. This happens often. I'm in Boston, and same thing, all flights are canceled. I'm standing in front of the person that's going to fix up my ticket, and I'm saying, well, my 9 o'clock flight's canceled, the 12 o'clock flight's full, so now I'm on a 3 o'clock flight. So I say to the person in front of me, look, this is a really tough day for you. You must be having a really hard time here. Is there anything I can do for you? Thanks to you, I've got all this time on my hands, so can I get you coffee or water or something, make your day a little easier? And she looked at me like I was an alien, and then she said, no, honestly, this is just regular stuff for me. It's no problem, but thank you for saying that. It's really kind of you. And then she looked at me and said, "Yeah, but you know what I can do for you? I can put you in business class."
Yeah.
I said, "Thank you."
I need to take us...
My two experiences, do you think you can change the world by yelling at people and insulting them, or do you think you can change the world by inspiring them?
By inspiring them in kindness and showing them grace. I need to take us to commercial break. We're visiting today with Lance Secretan. He's got many books out, but the two books that were on my desk and Linda's desk recently are his love story, that intensely personal memoir, as well as The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch. Inspire yourself, inspire others, inspire the world. I like threes. I just think threes are magical. So thank you for that, Lance. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk more with Lance Secretan about some of these secrets that leaderships know that we can even apply to our own marriages and our own relationships. We'll be back again after the break.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Rebecca and Linda Franklin after these messages.
This is for all you girls about 42. Tossing pennies into the fountain of youth.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
It's words you never heard.
We have a book titled The Art of Doing Nothing by Veronica Bien in our guest room by the bed. I'm telling you, this book is an impossible challenge. In the state of Maine, it's said that someone who bottoms chairs for a living is lazy, presumably because one's bottom is perpetually in the chair. To sozzle means to laze around or perform a task in a sloppy way. The word is mainly found in New England. A quote from 1848 describes the term as used by housekeepers in certain parts of Connecticut to refer to a lazy person. Other words for lazy people are abbey lubbers, scabberlatchers, and slaughter pooches. To me, the ultimate loblolly is someone who is too lazy to even fake like they're working.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin. Here's some more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
This is for all you girls.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Linda Franklin and we're visiting with Lance Secretan today. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was when you are in a leadership situation or you're not the leader at the table. And Lance, I find this happens a lot in technology, especially. I'm sure it's in other industries. I just can't speak on that behalf. But, you know, they've got the gorilla that's beating his chest. And then you've got the guy that's slamming his hand on the table. And they're all arguing. And sometimes it reminds me of my kitchen table with like my dad and my two boys and me. And, you know, it's all about, you know, loudness and who can say it the loudest or who can be heard. And sometimes I find that people mistake my kindness for a weakness because a lot of times I won't jump into that fray. I'll just wait until they kind of exhaust themselves and get themselves into a snit. And when they're done, then I'll speak. And a lot of times it is the voice of reason. It is the quiet voice that just has to have patience in order to be heard. And that's something that I think you develop over time, or is it the way we made? I like it because it works.
Well, I think that we're surrounded by what effectively is violence. Whether it's in our language, for example, we talk about being blown away and nuking people and destroying the competition, and all of these metaphors that come from war. And we've done a lot of work in my organization where we've researched this and found that actually is toxic, literally. In other words, we are releasing stress hormones in our body, cortisol and so norepinephrine and so on, which are actually attacking our immune system and making us sick. So people who live in those environments are actually ill. And then there are people, on the other hand, who are feeling a sense of being uplifted in much of their lives. These are people, for instance, that never get sick at work because they're inspired. And it's quite standard, isn't it, that people who hate their work or hate the people they work with are always sick. The people who love what they do are never sick. Why is that? Clearly, there's a connection here. I hope that you will always be like that because you will win that conversation. You can't sustain the violence forever, and it doesn't work anyway.
Lance, are you seeing a difference in the leadership qualities of men and women, or is it just more about the actual individual and not because of their sex?
I think it's more about the individual, and one of the depressing things I find in the corporate world is that women try to be more like men. And I think that's disappointing because I think the great gifts of the feminine energy, I don't mean of women, but of the feminine energy, is how effective that is. If you think about, Sheryl Sandberg and people like that who have great power in their gentle way of leading. And we need to copy that, not the other way around. It's not a football game.
Yes, I agree, and I see it now. But, my first career was over 20 years running a trading department on Wall Street. So, that it doesn't get rougher than that. But I'm... Right. And I guess I liked it at the time, but I certainly my male energy was rampant, and that because as a woman you had to be heard. But one of the CEOs that I really like now, and I want to see if you feel the same way, is Howard Schultz at Starbucks.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and Warren Buffett, I think too, is in the same space. And there's some wonderful stories about Howard Schultz, about how he's been a champion, for example, for the rights of his employees.
Yes.
Even though many of the board members have pressed him to remove, for instance, the health benefits for hourly workers and so on, and he's refused. And he said, if it comes to that, you need to leave the board. Now that's a courageous choice.
Oh yeah.
A man with a lot of principle.
Yeah, no, and he's doing a wonderful job, and now he's doing all these little videos of inspiring people around the country. I mean, that's what it's all about is inspiration. People need that because when you, as you say, when you turn on the TV, you're just not getting inspired unless you're watching Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, which I do most Sundays.
Well, the thing, too, is that the little gestures, whether they're knowing and even if they are, in a way, showmanship, it doesn't really matter. There's a wonderful story about Howard Schultz, how all the mugs and stuff that he sells in the store, he realized that they're all made in China, and he thought to himself, surely this is something that we can make in America, is it? We can't make mugs? We have to go to China for them? And he went to a disused factory in Ohio that had been shut down for years and years, and repurposed it and hired 300 people, and all the mugs that are sold now in Starbucks are made in Ohio. And that may or may not be a big deal that he gave 300 people a job, but more than that, it's a story that inspires me to buy coffee at Starbucks.
No, absolutely. He's so good to his employees, and they like working there, and they're well taken care of, and it works. I don't know why more CEOs can't see that. That is what going forward. That's what we need.
Cowboy movies.
That's what we need.
Or we just watch too much junk. One of the things that I do, Lance, that doesn't make me very popular, this Los Angeles, the television capital of the world, is I shut the TV off. Like I shut it off when my dad leaves. My dad lives with me. He's 82 for part of the year, and the other time he's in Buffalo, so he's kind of a snowbird. And when he's here, we do get direct TV, so he can watch his History Channel and the Bio Channel, all the things that he loves, and that's great. Right. But I shut the TV off when he's not here. And the kids are, they don't know any different because I've always done that. It's not like it's anything new. So when Grandpa leaves, the TV goes off. And I look at what's available and what their friends and their peers between like Dance Moms and these just stupid garbage shows that personify the worst of humanity. And I look at this like self-fulfilling prophecy because this sets expectations. Like my expectations were set by the Brady Bunch. I thought every problem was solved in 20 minutes and things would be fine. But I look at my kids' generation now going, they're learning that people fight, people backstab, people, it's our media too that's fueling, it's the chicken and the egg, which comes first, people's desire, and then the media fuels it, or does the media start it and it increases desire? It's, one or the other. But I really worry about our next generations and our coming years because this is a steady part of the American diet.
It is, but it's up to us, isn't it? We can't sort of blame the things that are in our environment. When I'm running workshops or coaching, I often ask people who their heroes are, and they tell me, a lot of them, my dad or my mom. Now, if I ask them about that, they'll say, well, my dad had high integrity. He was truthful, honest, authentic, genuine, loving, great human being. They wouldn't say, if he was the hero, well, he was rough, he was aggressive, forceful, yelling, loud. They wouldn't say that. That wouldn't be a hero. In other words, our heroes aren't those people. There are lots of them around, but they're not our heroes. And so if we want to be heroes, this, I think, is the most potent teaching we can do for our kids. We just need to live a certain way, model the behavior we want to see in our kids. Because they may look at the TV and see people being, dying and beating each other up, but who are they looking to for their examples? They're looking to you, and that will be the impression that keeps with them for the rest of their lives.
Well, it's funny you said that because I was thinking about my dad going, okay, who's one of the greatest people I know? And I think of Linda, my co-host, and what do I admire about them? I admire their honesty. I admire their integrity. I admire their dependability. I admire their evenness. I think, Linda, I don't know how long we've been friends, but we've never had like a fight. We've disagreed on things. We've respectfully, worked through and we're very different. In some ways we're very alike, but one of the things I really admire about you, Linda, is that evenness about you. I can count on you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. it's just part of me that if I like you and I respect you and I'm inspired by you, then I'll do anything that I can to keep that relationship going. And just like working at relationships with spouses and people that you might be living with, it's the same thing with friends. It's a working relationship. You can't take it for granted.
And it brings about the behavior you're looking for. If you are aggressive with someone, they'll be aggressive in return. If you are loving with someone, they will eventually become like that too with you.
Yeah. Yes. And, I test it out all the time.
Go ahead. I just wanted to know, because this is a question that I think about this a lot. Why is it so much easier to be polite and kind to a stranger than it is to be polite and kind to the people we live with every day? I understand taking it for granted, but how is it that we give coworkers gifts we agonize over for a, stupid Secret Santa, and then for our spouses, we're like, well, here's a gift card, or here's some money, or here's whatever. I look at that and I'm like, is that human nature, Lance, or is that something that we've kind of grown accustomed to?
I think we just get numb. I think we just get unlinked from what reality and good practice tells us. My wife and I, in 30 years, never had a fight. But like you said, we disagreed on things, but we never had a fight. But when we would get to that point, where there's a tension in the conversation, it's not going off the rails or anything, but you can see that there's clearly a disagreement going on here, a friendly one, but it's strong. She would stop and she would say to me, "Treat me like a customer." Brilliant. And you know what it did? It just got me to halt and recalibrate, reset, and I would say, you're absolutely right. Let me start over. Because I'd get passionate, or excited about something, and I'd start, scaling up the noise. And this is her beautiful way of bringing things down to the ground again and calming them down and reframing them so that we move forward on a much better basis. Now that's, I think, something we could always do.
We're visiting today with Lance Secretan. If you liked what you heard so far, please check us out at powereduptalkradio.com. You can find us at TogiNet, TOGINET.com, and iTunes. And when we come back from the break, we're going to visit more with Lance Secretan.
We've got lots more Powered Up with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin after these messages.
Do you want to get a contact high? Tune in for fun, inspiration, and motivation every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Learn how to maximize your mojo and just say no to the status quo. Get inspired and motivated by a fun-loving coach who knows what it's like to get through this thing called life. With your High on Life coach, Audra Irwin, each Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time and 12 noon Eastern.
Fairs offer wonderfully wild and wacky summer foods, from chicken fried bacon in Texas to Minnesota spaghetti and meatballs on a stick. There is something about dining at the fair that can make anyone an opsomaniac, or a person who is driven to the point of madness by food. State fairs are famous for their liverwort, or food with no nutritional value. The California State Fair boasts fried Krispy Kreme chicken sandwiches. That's fried chicken and Swiss cheese tucked into a Krispy Kreme donut served with a side of honey sauce. At the Iowa State Fair, you can enjoy a hot beef sundae. That's a big scoop of mashed potatoes over roast beef, covered with gravy, sprinkled with cheddar cheese, and garnished with a cherry tomato to look like a sundae. What's another word for messy food? Mawalla.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with Sandra Beck and Linda Franklin. Here's more Powered Up with Beck and Franklin.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Linda Franklin, and our guest today is Lance Secretan. He's got a bunch of books out. You're going to want to look him up. He's got a website that is Secretan, Secretan. He's Secret and then there's so much more. So that's how you spell it. When we left for the break, we were talking about Lance's comment about his wife and about fighting, and I sure fought with my ex-husband, and my kids sure fight. But then I got to thinking, what is a fight? Like, where does it escalate from, like, argument to disagreement to fighting? You know, everything is on a scale. And, you know, Lance, you started to rattle off some things on break that the audience, I think, would really like to hear, because I know I want to hear more about them. What are the criteria of, in a relationship, whether it's at work or at home, that really quantifies what is a fight?
Well, a fight involves a winner and a loser. And that's a very bad place to be. So there are lots of ways of making another person lose. You can yell at them. You can have a personal attack. You can make yourself seem bigger by making the other person feel smaller. You can turn a conversation that you're having about a fact into a personal attack, which has nothing to do with the fact. And you can also do emotional damage to a person by undermining them in some way, which is sort of like the passive-aggressive behavior or the flouncing or walking away, those kinds of things where you're clearly, or hanging up on the phone is another one of those things, which you should absolutely never do. Hanging up on the phone is the ultimate insult.
Yeah. I mean, don't they say all the time, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So, you know, when I was younger, I wanted to be right. So, you know, that didn't lead down to very good outcomes. But as I got older and my priorities changed, you know, now you just, you know, it's not worth it. I mean, it's a very delicate balance, because you don't want to feel that you're compromising yourself into something that turns into resentment. But, you know, I just don't pay attention as much to the disagreements as I used to, and I think that that's a good thing. I just sort of let them go and say, well, it's a passing cloud. It'll be gone in a few minutes.
Yeah, it's also trivial when you reflect on it.
Yes. Yeah, and right at this stage of my life, I'll tell you, with no question that I want to be happy, and whatever that takes, I'm there. I mean, happiness is not overrated. It's just a wonderful place to be.
I did my PhD thesis on Egypt and Israel. I interviewed Begin and Sadat and the top 40 opinion formers in both Egypt and Israel, and I asked them, why are you fighting? And then I gathered all that research and I swapped it. So I gave all the research from the Israeli side to the Egyptians and vice versa. And, you know, when I asked them, why are you fighting, here was the answer, basically. They said, well, they blew up a bus in the bus station in Haifa or Tel Aviv or wherever, and so we're going to get them back. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the big picture, about, well, we're looking for a homeland or we want to exist safely in our territory, and those kinds of things. It was the last insult. And that's so typical of domestic violence and argument, too. It's about the last insult. If you can get past that and say, you hurt me, but I want to move beyond that now. And it's not about forgiving either, by the way, because when you forgive, you make someone wrong. You're right, so you're going to forgive them.
I never thought of it that way, but, you know, you're right. So, I don't use the word forgiveness. I just say, you know, I just kind of, if I'm really upset, then I'm going to say, what you said really hurt me, and he looks at me like I'm crazy, and then he'll say, hey, it's not what I meant, and I certainly didn't realize that I was. So I think, you know, And you have to do it right at the moment. You can't do it like 48 hours later because they don't remember. But if you just stop dead in your tracks and just say, hey, that what you just did really hurt me, then, then hopefully they understand and maybe it won't happen again.
I think you just described it perfectly, because the way I try to teach people is that when you have something that someone says that is wounding, the way to put it to them is to say, when you said this, it made me feel like this. Now, usually the other person will say, well, I didn't mean to make you feel like that. And you've now disarmed the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so now we can talk about how I feel as separate from the facts that we're trying to talk about.
Well, and I think you raised, I would have loved to see you in some of my domestic violence classes, because if you had, and this is about recovering from them, not how to be a domestic violence person, but if you had told me 10 years ago that it's just the phrase you wrote, it's about the last insult. When that happens and you don't react and you just move on, it's amazing how it changes you, the person who's being insulted. But a person that you should be with would want to talk about your feelings, like what Linda and you were just talking about, but somebody that you shouldn't be with just keeps on with the insult or keeps on with you said a fight is where there's a winner or a loser. Like, these all came really loud in my head with the domestic violence marriage. And that these things, like if I had known it's about the last insult, like that resonated with me to my core, Lance, because you're right. And there's still, I co-parent with this person today. There's still insults hurled my way on a regular basis. Now, Linda's helped me see them as clouds to float by, and I don't get drawn in anymore to those things, and they really don't even hurt anymore. But it's about the last insult. That was perfect, whether it's peace in the Middle East or in our households.
Right. How old are your boys?
Now they're 10 and 13.
Oh, you haven't got long, have you?
Well, if you had asked me that this morning, it would be a whole different answer. But yeah, and I don't know. I think when you're in it, it doesn't go quick. But then maybe after it's over, it goes quick. Because it doesn't feel quick right now.
Did you ever have children, Lance?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. And, it's an up and down thing, isn't it? I mean, raising children's not a walk in the park.
No, I only raised a puppy, but I don't have children. But no,
you're raising a puppy and me. Let's be honest.
I'm raising a puppy, and Sandra's my new daughter.
I wish I knew then what I know now, because I would be a much better parent if I was equipped with the information that I have today. But it's funny, isn't it? We get to be parents when we are really immature, and now we're expected to be really good adults, and we're just not equipped for that. And by the way, where's the training? One of the most important things you can do in your life, and we get zip training.
Well, that's, Lance, I have a unique perspective because I have, my 80-year-old dad, and then, there's me in my 40s, and then I've got my kids, that are 10 and 13 right now, and it's always amazing to me that I sit here, and I really, truly do, and I go, why am I raising these kids and he's not? Or like when my mom was alive a couple years ago, it's like, why aren't babies given to grandparents? I don't like to think that there's some kind of cosmic joke or mistake, but boy, it sure feels like it sometimes that we have to repeat the same mistakes generation after generation.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know. Well, I'm still chewing on this. I keep going back to it's about the last insult, and I just think, your next book coming out should be for narcissists and about the narcissists in the world that are leading our countries, leading our industries, leading our. And do you think you can fix one, Lance, or do you think that they're just born that way and stay that way?
Well, I think everybody can learn, and I think it's our job to do the teaching. And I think, by the way, that, it's interesting that quite a lot of this conversation has been about dysfunction. And what do you do about it and how do you interact with it and so on. It would be nice, wouldn't it, if we spent an equal amount of time talking about how do we inspire people? What are the little things that we can do that make people feel better, bigger, more engaged, more in love with us? I mean, after all, what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody we connect to falls in love with us. The more we spend time on the things that we're discussing, the more we'll have more of those things. You know, I had a professor once who said to me, the more we talk about problems, the more problems we'll have, the better we'll get at them. The more we talk about solutions, the more of those we'll have, and we'll get better at them. So let's focus our time on solutions. Let's focus our time on helping people to be inspiring and loving, as opposed to figuring out how to deal with psychopaths.
Well, then I think we have to have you back, Lance. I think we need to have part 1 and 2. We have part 1 that identified a lot of the things that are going on. We'll have to bring you back to have, our inspirational hour. What one thing do you think people could start doing today upon listening to this broadcast that you would think would make the biggest impact in their lives?
Well, I think we need to tell each other we love each other. It's a stunning thing. It's so simple, and yet so hard for some people. I talked to a guy the other day, just 2 or 3 days ago, who told me that even on his deathbed, his dad could not tell him he loved him.
Yeah.
He told him, I love you, Dad, and his dad, in his very last breaths, said, I you too.
Wow.
This is how hard it is for us. So, what could people, listeners do right now? As soon as you go home, first person that opens the door at home, tell them you love them. When you go to work tomorrow morning, go up to the person that you spend most time with and say, I love you. I love working with you. I love what you do. I love how we look after customers together. I love this work. Watch their faces.
Lance Secretan, check him out at Secretan.com. When you come back next week, we're going to have more guests like this. We're going to interview Dondi Dolan of the 5 Elements. I want to thank you, Lance Secretan, for being an inspiration, for being just a wonderful guest today. I had a great time, and I love you, and thank you for being here. I love you too, Linda.
I love you. Love is in the air.
I love you both, too. Thank you for being brilliant. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back next week with Dondi Dolan and the 5 Elements.
We're so glad you joined us for Powered Up with Beck and Franklin. Sandra Beck, Los Angeles-based single mother and technology company owner, knows what it's like to be fit, funny, and fantastic in your 40s. Linda Franklin, a New Yorker with a successful marriage and promise